Who was Dittersdorf, and why is his bass concerto so popular? What's going on? It's Jason Heath, and we're talking today about Karl Ditters von Dittersdorf. I've always been curious about these von or van names.
To give it the perfect ending was a bit of the old Ludwig van.
This is a part of a new series I'm calling Who Were These People? Or Stupid Bass History, or if you've got a better name for that, leave it in the comments below. So the big question for today, who was Dittersdorf? Dittersdorf was born in Vienna in 1739. His father was a military tailor in the Austrian Imperial Army under Charles VI. Unlike a lot of composers, Dittersdorf seemed kind of happy. He studied violin and composition, and in 1754 was hired as a court composer for, okay, I'll take a stab at this, Prince Joseph of Saxe-Hildburghausen. This whole court composer world seems fascinating to me. I mean, what would it have been like to be alive in those days? Ditters von Dittersdorf, Ditters von Dittersdorf, Ditters von Ditters von Ditters von Dittersdorf. Okay, maybe not like that. He became acquainted with Christoph Gluck, who had just achieved greatness as an opera composer. In 1763, he traveled to Bologna with Gluck, a trip which would have a great impression on his future work as a composer. In 1764, Dittersdorf was given the position of court composer in Johannesburg in the modern-day Czech Republic. This was when he also met the great Joseph Haydn, who would become one of his closest friends. Since this new post required a title, Dittersdorf was sent to Vienna and given the noble title of von Dittersdorf. His full surname thus became Ditters von Dittersdorf, but he's usually referred to simply as Dittersdorf. Johann von Hall was perhaps Dittersdorf's most famous student. About 1785, Haydn, Dittersdorf, Mozart, and von Hall played string quartets together. Dittersdorf taking first violin, Haydn second violin, Mozart viola, and von Hall cello. His autobiography, which was completed just 3 days before his death, is a fascinating document and window into what it was like being a court composer and the whole culture of European aristocracy at the time. Here's Korneel Le Compte, principal double bass of Belgium's National Opera, on Dittersdorf's autobiography.
I read that and I couldn't stop reading because it's every page is full of surprises and how people lived back then. And he's very full of himself, Dittersdorf. You can see that, but at the same time, it's so interesting to see how they lived and how his life went and how life at the court went, and you just wished you could be there just for a while, maybe an hour, or just to have this impression and bring it back to the modern world.
This leads us to our second topic, which is why is his bass concerto so popular, especially in Europe? First, let's clear up a few points of confusion about the Dittersdorf concerto, although this might actually muddy the waters, so we'll see. One of the big challenges is the tuning system of the time. Composers like Dittersdorf wrote for the bass in Viennese tuning, which can be confusing for bassists who aren't familiar with that.
I can really only encourage bass players to try it. Just try it. You take an A and a D and a G, one semitone lower, and a top A from solo set, and you have your strings, modern strings. And then you try and you play around with it, and you'll never go back to the modern bass. You'll go back to it, but you'll go back with a different mindset.
Though it's not an easy piece, even in Viennese tuning, there's certainly an extra level of awkwardness that results from playing this in typical perfect fourths double bass tuning. Another complication is the key it's played in. I mean, we see his concertos being referred to as being in D major, E major, E flat major. I mean, what is up with that?
When you have a concerto for bass, the bass reads in D. Always in D. Even if it's in E major or in E flat, the bass player reads in D, just tunes the instrument high. It's like solo tuning. But the orchestra has to play in this more difficult key of E flat, for instance. And they have these forked fingerings on the flutes and a different, more awkward and a more subdued sound for the orchestra, which makes a soloist ring out even more, because not only is higher, but for him it's easy because he's playing in D. So he's got all the advantages of playing with open strings and stuff. So he has the bright sound, and the orchestra has to get a more subdued sound because it's more difficult.
Okay, hopefully that clears things up a bit. So let's turn now to the big question. Why is this concerto so popular in Europe?
But you know the funniest thing about Europe is?
What?
It's the little differences.
To help answer this, I turned to Dennis Pientak of the Philharmonie Zuidnederland in the Netherlands.
The reason why this piece is so prominent in Europe is because it's a very nice contrast to the romantic concerto, because it does not have those long lyrical lines which you can show later. But in the first round, what they want to hear is, are you able to control, basically, your instrument and still phrase and shape the piece musically? Because I think interpretation-wise, Dittersdorf does not leave a lot of room for freedom. Whenever we hear Dittersdorf played like that's a no, or so it's actually a piece where you can show very well that you understand classical phrasing and that you know where you phrase to and where you go away. Van Gaal leaves a lot more room for freedom, which is super nice, but maybe in the first round of an audition it is a bit too wild. Van Gaal is so modified to an audition piece by changing all the octaves, changing all the articulations, basically ignoring also the original version. Of course, with Dittersdorf it's kind of the same, but there's so many different versions being played in an audition in Europe, at least. I don't know how it is in the US. And with Dittersdorf, it's kind of, even if you play the very original version, the same things stay important somehow. And especially those string changes and short notes, where you really have to control, is crucial in orchestra, because most of the times, let's be honest, as a bass section, the difficult passages are mostly difficult string changes or fast shifts or whatever, like these kind of passages. And you can still show in the second round when you play your Bottesini or Kusevitsky that you have a big tone and a beautiful vibrato.
Love it or hate it, the Dittersdorf Concerto is part of the standard double bass repertoire, especially as an audition piece in Europe. It was the first concerto I ever played with orchestra, and I've had a good time performing and teaching it over the years. And you know, maybe it warrants a second look from American bassists as well.
It's interesting how, looking at performers who do it in Viennese tuning, how that might potentially inspire somebody to play it in orchestral tuning. It's always good to investigate a little bit of the history in order to inform your performance. You know, even if, like, say, if you're, doing Dittersdorf for an audition, it's not like you're going to be, changing strings or bringing two basses out for that matter. You can use that to make an informed decision of, okay, like maybe, I could play a couple harmonics here or there in order to kind of accurately reflect how this might have been done.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I've got links in the description to the research that I did for this. You might enjoy checking out our Kusevitsky video if you enjoyed this deep dive, and we'll link up to that here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again in the next video.